Hello everyone, and welcome to our symposium, Childhood Poverty, Lifelong Impact. I'm so happy to see you all here. My name is Daniela Marinej, and I am here on behalf of UNICEF Student Team Tilburg. There I am the treasurer and the head of the advocacy committee, but most importantly, I'm part of a loving, hardworking team. And without their help, I wouldn't have been able to organize this amazing project. So, I'd just like to take this moment to thank them. Also, when you were walking in, you've received a brochure from us, so maybe you could check that out in order to see what we do in order to protect children's rights and support their opportunities. As someone who has worked in the activism field since 2020, I always get this question, which is, why do I do this? And why is there still a need for action? And this is what motivated me to start this project that you can see here today, because I want to show you the realities that people face and the struggles that children are subjected to, even here in the Netherlands. And so with the help of 4 amazing guest speakers, which you will get to see in a moment, I challenge you to deepen your understanding of the impact that childhood poverty has on your adult life. And I want you to engage in their presentations, to enjoy the whole process and not be afraid to ask questions. Also, we will have a panel discussion at the end of the event, so that will also give you the opportunity to get to know the speakers better and ask them any questions you would like. This event, of course, is a collaboration with Studium Generale Tilburg, and they are a stage for society, culture, and science here at Tilburg University. If you don't know this already, this event counts for your Studium Generale certificate. And please just check out their website and see what other activities they are doing. And with that being said, I would like to give a start to our event. One small note is that we are going to take pictures for our social media platforms. So if you would like to not appear in the pictures, you can let the UNICEF volunteers know. They are here in the front row, but also me as well. And also we are going to record this video for the YouTube channel of the Studium Generale. And with that being said, I am going to invite our first speaker to talk. The first presentation is going to be given by Marion van den Heuvel. Sadly, she will not be able to join us physically today, but she recorded a presentation that I am going to invite you to watch together. She is an associate professor here at Tilburg University and also the leader of the Zero Poverty Lab. And her current research focuses on how early life factors can have an impact on your brain development in the future. So I'm going to click on it. I can see the mouse. I can see it now. Perfect. Okay. And I am going to press play. I'm hoping that this hears perfectly. Okay. Oh, again.
Thank you for joining this session. It is my honor to open this Studium Generale session about childhood poverty. I am Marion van den Heuvel and I am a researcher at the Zero Poverty Lab. I'm associate professor at Transo as well, and my research line within the Zero Poverty Lab is breaking intergenerational poverty, which means that you have a child being born in poverty and that the chances of growing up in poverty are very high. So you have intergenerational continuation of poverty. First, a little bit about the Zero Poverty Lab. So we are a lab located at Tilburg University, and we are a group of researchers that are passionate about this topic and our mission of breaking the cycle of poverty and helping children to get the best start possible. So currently we have about 500,000 people in the Netherlands living in relative poverty, according to the CBS. But worldwide we have about 45% of our population that live on only about $7 a day. So poverty is a worldwide problem, and a lot of children live in poverty or are born in poverty every day. So one of the missions of the Zero Poverty Lab is to break the cycle of intergenerational poverty. And my research line adds to this because I'm investigating the mechanisms of intergenerational poverty, and specifically in the really early beginnings, so during pregnancy and in the first years of life. And one of the things that we also do in the Zero Poverty Lab is understanding and mitigating the adverse effects of poverty on brain and behavior. So we are a group of multidisciplinary researchers. Some of us are focused on psychology, neuroscience. We also have AI, theology, law. So we really spread across our campus. Then I'll start by explaining more about the mechanisms of poverty and why the first years are so important. So when a brain is being built or developing in the womb, you can see this as building a house. So there's a first stage, which is the funding or the lower parts, and this is usually done under the ground, so you don't really see this, but this is really important. So this foundation is during conception till about 2 years of life. And then we have building, and then you're building a house. This is between 2 and 25 years of life. And then we are finishing the house by about 25 plus years. Then the house is relatively done. We know now from research that there's still some development going on, but mostly, unfortunately for a lot of us, the deterioration starts already after 25 plus years. Therefore, the foundation or the foundation in the beginning is extremely important, because when the house doesn't have a good foundation, it will not be a very strong house. And what I mean with this is that when a child is born in poverty, the foundation is less strong, and therefore even if the child gets out of poverty, the foundation is still implicated. So in my research and my group's research, we mostly focus on this foundation and the early beginnings of brain development. And in this period, the brain also develops very rapidly, which means that it is extra sensitive for environmental input. So what happens if the first 1,000 days of life, which is from conception to about 2 years of age, when these are not optimal? I divide this usually in 3 things. So either the baby brain is undernourished, which means that, for instance, the parents do not have time for quality interactions and stimulating play. There's no money for toys and books, or there's no good nutrients. So this is really about nourishing with food. So there's not enough healthy fats and too few calories, for instance, because there's not enough food around, not enough money to buy food. So in this case, the baby brain gets undernourished. But it can also be overstimulated when the first 1,000 days are not optimal. And this is, for instance, when there's too much stress and chaos in the house. A brain can get overstimulated. Also, if there's insufficient sleep and rest, for instance, because there's no good bed, there's no good ventilation, the temperature is too high or too low, or there's a lot of noise because you are living in a very noisy neighborhood, or right next a train track, for instance. And then the third one is that the baby brain is unprotected, and this means from toxins mostly. So, for instance, the mother smokes and drinks during pregnancy, or smoking occurs in the presence of the baby. Or the house is in an unhealthy place, for instance, next to a factory that has lots of toxins in the water and in the air, and in this case the baby is unprotected from these unhealthy substances and unhealthy toxins. And what we then get is a broken foundation, or a not optimal foundation, which means that the rest of the house, when it gets built, is not strong, and there are some cracks in the roof, some cracks in the rest of the house, and then this child will encounter problems and not optimal brain development for the rest of their life. So if a brain is born in poverty, or a child is born in poverty, you get a cycle of suboptimal brain development, because these three factors are also highly interconnected. So usually when there's poverty, all of these three things are working together. So the brain is both undernourished, overstimulated, and unprotected all at the same time, and then we get an unhappy baby brain and an unhappy brain already in the womb, and therefore the brain gets into a cycle of suboptimal brain development. One example is also that when there's suboptimal brain development in one section, for instance, the brain is overstimulated because the brain is not sleeping well enough, then it also gets undernourished, even though when the baby is, for instance, or the child is going to school and is getting lots of stimulation, because the brain is too tired. There's also it's also more difficult to get nourished. So it's really interconnected. So you can imagine when a child is very tired because there's not enough food, not enough room for healthy sleep, then when the child goes to school, it will learn less because it's too tired and maybe hungry, and therefore it all is interconnected. Then in the Zero Poverty Lab we made a figure where you can see that poverty affects all aspects of a child's life. So children in poverty, when we start on the top, there's more chance of preterm birth, more chance of chronic disease, cancer, there's increased mortality as a baby, but also in elderly. When the child grows older, there's more chance of substance use, but also the child is more exposed to substance abuse. Neurodevelopmental factors and disorders. There's a higher chance of adult poverty, lower productivity, lower academic attainment and achievement, and mental health problems later in life. So it really affects all aspects of a child's life, currently and also in the later life. And this is really why we want to study this. And we have several people in our research line that are working on this important topic, and one of them is Nadia, and you will hear from her later on. So our conclusion is that the first 1,000 days are crucial, and that we really have to do something about this. So a child cannot just get over poverty because it's literally in their body and their brain. And it matters where you are born. In Dutch it's waar je wieg staat. And therefore we need to invest in breaking intergenerational poverty by focusing on healthy pregnancy and by supporting young families. And in the lab we are also working on this. So we are developing interventions, we're testing and evaluating interventions to help families have healthy pregnancy and and try to break this cycle of poverty. Okay, thank you very much. Next you will hear from Nadia, which is one of my PhD students working on this topic. If you have any questions, you can always email me. It's very unfortunate that I cannot be there, but if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Thank you.
Okay, so this was the presentation from our first speaker, and now I'm going to give the floor to Nadia Ali. She is a PhD candidate in the Department of Cognitive Neuropsychology here at Tilburg University, and she's also an active member of the Zero Poverty Lab, where she researches the mechanisms of intergenerational poverty and their effect on the mother's and the child's health. I will now invite her to continue with her presentation.
Let's see. So let's see if this works. Yes. Okay, well, I got a bit of introduction already. So I can start maybe a bit with my background. I was actually a student here as well at Tilburg University during my bachelor. I studied psychology and the major was cognitive neuropsychology. I was already very interested in the brain and also in early life. So I dabbled a bit in prenatal factors and then child brain functioning. And then I went on to do a master, which was a lot more molecular, where I got interested in what we call gene-environment interactions, so epigenetics. And now in the PhD, I kind of combined the two. So my topic is intergenerational poverty and its mechanisms, and they're largely molecular. So when we look at early life, and I'll tell you a little bit about it in this presentation, a lot of it happens, that happens during pregnancy is about these kind of environment-gene interactions. So I thought it would be nice to start with a kind of crash course in brain development. I'm not going to get too technical, but you actually heard from Marion a little bit about how important that early period is. And that is mostly because the brain already starts developing in the womb. So in fact, a lot of the majority of the neurons that we're born with, the brain cells, they're already there at birth. Now, a lot happens after as well. But so the adult brain is estimated to have about 81 billion neurons. Now, the estimates vary a lot because of the difficulty in studying a living brain. So also, all the estimates that I give you will be very conservative. So different studies find different numbers, and I've chosen the lower numbers. So there are about 81 billion neurons, but actually the connections between them are a lot more. And those connections make up the majority also of the size of the brain, actually. We call them synapses. They look kind of, this is a simplified version. So two neurons connect, and each of them has thousands of synapses, in fact, in the brain. Here we have only 3 shown. But this is where the brain cells communicate with each other. It's where everything happens, and if that connection, for example, is repeated, then it's also strengthened over time. If it's not engaged, then eventually it's pruned away, is what we call it, or cut off. So it's not maintained anymore. Other immunes or other cells in the brain make sure that it's disposed of. And so the developing brain, actually, it's quite impressive that in the first years, starting from conception, there are on average of 250,000 neurons growing per minute. So that's really a staggering amount. And for that to happen, certain nutrients are needed, like certain amino acids that come from proteins, certain essential fatty acids. So there are a lot of factors that need to be present for this to go well. And also, oh, that's a typo with my finger, but also synapses, actually, they start to form a little bit later, and there are so many of them. So I had to double check also the math on this, because every time I prepare this kind of information for a presentation, I think, wow, this is so much, but it is indeed an estimate, and that's, again, a conservative one, about 700,000 per second. And this is experience-driven for a child, which means that depending on what they're exposed to, certain connections are strengthened or weakened. And so when we talk about the effects of poverty, I am also looking at actually the mechanisms, because poverty is a kind of umbrella term. What it means is you are at higher risk for many different adverse factors. Some of them are shown here, and this is in relationship to brain development, so a kind of summary of the literature in terms of the mechanisms that people study. Some of them are better studied than others. And it also depends. They have particular importance at different stages of that brain development. Very big field is nutrition, very important. Also maternal mental health has become a point of interest, and overall maternal health. And of course, they all interact with each other. So a mother who is more stressed is probably also more likely to eat less healthy, or to, for example, engage in using substances like smoking as a coping mechanism. And often family dynamics, for example, is there a partner? Is the partner supportive, and so on. So they all work with each other. And so when we try to understand how they would affect brain development, we need to consider the timing of development. So a general rule of developing organs is that the faster they're developing in a certain time period, the more sensitive or susceptible they are to something going wrong. And that is also the case with the brain. So early on, already in the first trimester, the neurogenesis, what we call, this is just a growth of neurons, starts. And then, for example, the connections actually, they start a bit later. And so factors like nutrition, when we look at nutrition, it's actually everywhere. It's important at every stage. Of course, in terms of micronutrients, there may be a bit different ones that are really crucial at specific stages. But at all stages, also throughout childhood, a child needs nutrition to develop, or proper nutrition to develop well. An interesting example from the micronutrients is folic acid. Maybe you've heard about it. Pregnant women are told that they should take folic acid. And nowadays, actually, the advice is to start early. If you're already thinking about getting pregnant, to do it. And that's because it's crucial for that very early part where the brain starts to develop. And it really starts off as a small structure, and then the neurons expand towards the outside. So there is a part of that development that needs to go well, and folic acid is needed for that early on. Later on, it's not as crucial, it's still important, but there is a window that's really important. Other factors such as, for example, toys, books, if parents are reading to a child, of course that matters later on, when the synapses, when the connections are forming or they're being pruned away. And also speech, the kind of vocabulary that the child is exposed to, and so on. And throughout childhood, there are more and more factors from the environment that become important, and early on they're more biological. And so I thought it would be nice to also add a bit about what we're doing with all of this. So we started with the theoretical basis, and that's based on poverty around the world. And so we wanted to see what is the situation also in the Netherlands. I'm working with this data set. The acronym is DIAPER. It's not my creation, the acronym, so I don't take credit for that. So it's actually a really large data set of almost all of the births here in the Netherlands. And it combines information from healthcare providers, the CBS data, and for those of you who are not Dutch, CBS has a lot of information. Basically, if you sign in anywhere with your DigiD, they know that about you. So there is a lot of data that's administrative data, and we're also adding pesticide and pollution data because we want to see the relationship between the socioeconomic status or income, poverty, and exposure. And we actually, with this, we wanted to see what is really the situation here. We don't want to make assumptions because, for example, a study in the US found that certain toxin is a problem, that will be the case here as well. Poverty is very contextual. And so we look at the birth weight and the prematurity of babies. So birth weight is a very robust indicator for future health for babies, and prematurity, we know that children or babies born into poverty tend to have a higher risk of being premature. And being premature means that the baby has to spend some time in the NICU. The parents need to spend more time, effort, resources on helping the baby develop and rehabilitate. So it's a stressful event, not only for the baby, but for the family as well. And what we find, at least for now, is that income does seem to affect birth weight, and this is really preliminary. We're still working on this. But an interesting one is that there is a protective effect of education. Now, we don't know why that is. One can say, well, parents are probably making better decisions, but another is they probably have a larger social support network. Their circumstances may be very different. So the education is just an indicator, but there's probably more going on behind that. And from there, we also wanted to actually go into looking at the brain. And this is an ongoing current project that we're just starting with the recruitment. So if you have a baby, if you want, you can participate in it. But there we want to see, we want to compare on the one hand self-reported stress, because stress people are often asked by a questionnaire, but actually if you're exposed to a lot of stress, your tolerance is also different. You would probably report differently on a questionnaire. So we want to compare hair biomarkers of cortisol and DHA, and you've probably heard about cortisol, the stress hormone. There's a lot about it. And we also have mom and baby in the lab that interact with each other. We put on EEG, this cap, that's electroencephalography. It measures brain activity from the scalp. It's completely non-invasive, so it's nice to use in baby research. And then what we can see is here mom has the EEG as well, and we look at the synchrony between their brain activity. So when people interact, and especially between a caregiver and a baby, there is increased, we can actually observe a synchrony. So we want to investigate the role of stress a little bit further there, and also just interaction between the baby and the mom. And we want to see, because we have also stressed moms who are not from a poorer background, and we think that anything that's in fact affecting the interaction is more about the stress actually than poverty. So before I wrap up, I just wanted to leave the tone a bit positive, that even though all of this is happening in early life, the brain has a remarkable ability for plasticity. So by plasticity, we just mean those connections that form and that can be changed, and that goes on throughout the life. And I think we have an opportunity to intervene at every step. The effects of poverty accumulate, but they're not, it's not a sentence for life, at least as far as brain development goes. There are very sensitive periods indeed, and some things can go very wrong, but for the majority of the cases, there is a lot we can do at every step. Thank you. And also, by the way, I'm very open to questions, or if you want to get in touch, either after or via email. So, do we do?
Yes, I am going to search for the second mic. There you go. Okay. That's perfect. Let's see. It's working. Okay, perfect.
Yes.
I would like to kind of open the floor for a short Q&A session. I will leave the floor so for you, so I'll kind of switch here. So if anyone in the audience...
For the film, it's better to stand more in the center.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Sorry.
We will move a bit for the YouTube video, but if you have any questions, you can raise your hand and I will come and give you the mic. But before that, I kind of want to open the floor to questions with asking you what are some strategies that we can use in order to break the cycle of intergenerational poverty?
Yeah, so, I mean, it is the question, right? What can we do? I think we can, what I would say is the earlier we start, the better. Support parents, future parents, or, young couples who are pregnant and they're waiting a baby, regardless of their circumstances, whether we think they're ready or not. I think starting early already, and there are a lot of stressors early on during pregnancy. There are a lot of financial stressors and also general stressors in terms of becoming a parent, or maybe there is no support. So, of course, my focus would be early is better. But I would say at any step, if we can do something, it's best to do it. And children, they don't choose in what environment they're born. So I do think it's a responsibility to try to do what we can. And I think some things are clearer than others. I don't know if we have the solution yet. It's a complicated problem. A lot of countries are trying to also work on it. But yeah, some things are clearer than others, at least from the research.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience? Anyone that I should come up to? If not, you can also just engage in all the presentations and then in the panel discussion at the end, ask your questions. So it's really up to you. Then if not, we can kind of switch things up a bit, because something that is directly tied to childhood poverty is also childhood hunger and malnutrition, which is why we also decided to invite our speaker from the Zero Hunger Lab to speak. So our first guest speaker is Hein Floren, who is an associate professor at the Master of Business Analytics and Operations Research, and he's also the co-founder of the Zero Hunger Lab here at Tilburg University. And his research focuses on the way we can apply business analytics models or data science models to solve childhood hunger and malnutrition. So I will invite him to join us here and share interesting information with us.
Thank you. This one?
Yes. Oh yeah, okay, have that one.
I have this one. So, good afternoon. I would like to talk a little bit more from where Nadia and Marion were talking about. Hey, you heard very often, you heard the word nutrition. There is a kind of nutrition that is needed for the brain, and in fact a lot is needed. And that's what we always also are doing at the Zero Hunger Lab. Let me first explain a little bit about the Zero Hunger Lab. What are we doing in comparison to the Zero Poverty Lab? So as you know, we have the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and we are really working on number 2. And number 2 is about zero hunger in 2030. That's only 5 years from now. Can you imagine? So, and what we do is we work on, because when you look to SDG 2, what the United Nations, so in fact nearly all countries have agreed, is it's in fact a rather broad topic. It's about food, it's malnutrition, it's food aid, but it's also agricultural productivity and also biodiversity. And as already was announced by Daniela, most of our people work in data science. Not all of them, but most of them do. Right? So they work in econometrics, statistics, operations research, AI. And what we want to do, and that's the final one, we want to have impact with our research by working together with organizations in the field. And that is maybe relatively new when you look to a university. Because we really, our PhD, they really work together with all kinds of organizations. And so at this moment we have around 9 to 10 PhDs. They are supported by a number of master thesis students. And these PhDs are in fact coupled to the organizations, the humanitarian partners with whom we work together. And so there's biodiversity, ZOA, WFP, the FAO, all these medium-sized and big organizations trying to reduce hunger in the world. We also have quite some academic partners, and we need some sponsors, because we also need money to do all this research. Unfortunately, not yet UNICEF yet, but I'm going to talk to Daniela, and especially now when I heard that she's the treasurer. So. But that is really, UNICEF is really on our list, because I think we can do a lot together with them. Now to the topic of hunger. Now it gets more serious. So when you look tonight, 811 million people go to bed hungry. That's 47 times the entire population of the Netherlands. And so when you are hungry, that means that during the day, you not have sufficient food. So your calorie intake has been too low. And of course, because the calorie intake has been too low, probably you also have the macro and micronutrients and the fats that are not right for your body. That's the first one. But this one is even worse, and it was also referring to one of the things that Marion was mentioning. Worldwide, 3 billion people cannot afford a nutritious diet. And they have a diet like this. And when we are in good shape, we have, let's say, a diet like that. which contains much more micro and micronutrients, which we need to develop our body, but also our cognitive abilities, like explained by Nadia and Marion. But the worst thing is this one. At least this is the one most touching, and that's also with the topic of today. When you look to the children worldwide, you see that nearly 200 million people, 200 million children under 5, are what we call wasted or stunting. And what is called wasted is the child has, let's say, the kind of the normal height, but is far too thin. And stunted, then it's too thin and also too small. And especially the latter one is a very big issue. Because these people, the stunted, these are, let's say, the children that in the first 1,000 days really had a lot of shortages. And what we see and what we know, but that's why we also work together with the Zero Poverty Lab, is the frontal cortex is not developing well. And then you get what Marion explained. Let's say the house is built on a very bad fundament. If you and I, as we are sitting here, I don't see very young people, so if we get malnourished and structurally malnourished, let's say for 2 years, and we get good food again, we completely recover. A child, never. There's no chance for a child when it has been in these first 3 years, first 5 years, that it can recover the brain damage in the frontal cortex. That means they cannot learn very well. That means they cannot oversee what they are doing. So they cannot make plans. We are often surprised that in Africa, people cannot make plans. Why don't they get themselves out of the poverty? Most of the time it has to do with this effect. 45 million children are wasted, and 140, so nearly 150 million children are stunted. So it's a huge, huge amount. So, and that means, let's say that with regard to hunger, that we have to say that still at this moment, and I'm afraid it will not be better in the coming years, every 10 seconds a child dies of hunger. And more than 60% of them are girls. So there's also an imbalance in there. And I showed you the wasting and stunting. But we also have the malnutrition, also pointed out by Nadia. And so weak immune systems, you get kind of unprotected. Brains are not functioning well, and thereby almost no future. And the chance of getting obese might seem strange, but once you get food, but the wrong kind of food, you are eating too much. In fact, you are eating too much calories. You grow obese, but you don't get the right nutrients. So we really, in countries like Mexico, you see that. Mexico was a country where there was a lot of hunger, let's say 3-4 decades ago, and then they switched to the relatively cheap kind of food, and a lot of people became obese. Now, how are we trying to help? And I took 3 projects which have to do with children, of course. And this is a project which we did together with the United Nations World Food Programme. It's the biggest aid organization in the world on food, and it's also one of the biggest transportation companies. So with a lot of optimization work, we tried to optimize, let's say, the flows in the world that go from, let's say, countries where we can buy food to countries where we need food. And we also need food in South America. We also need food in Asia. That's often forgotten. Everybody thinks of Africa, but there's a lot more hunger in the world. Now, we have developed a really nice tool for this that has taken nearly 10 years to get it implemented, all the research, etc. But in 2021, it's not my statement, this is Amir, Amir Abdullah. He was the logistics chief of the United Nations World Food Programme, and he claimed that by the analytics tools they used, they could feed 2 million people annually with exactly the same budget. I was looking at, let's say, I saw this message a few months ago that in Gaza, they also use the tool which we have developed, and they save 12.5 million per month by simply having better logistics. And that means, in this case, and that's happy that it's not a company, but they simply help more people. And they don't return the money, or the money is not going to the investors. A second project, which we think might become very important, is about detecting malnutrition with children. And here we work together with Welthungerhilfe, that's a very big German organization on reducing hunger. And this is, let's say, the traditional way of weighing and measuring children to find out whether they are malnourished. But what the idea of Welthungerhilfe was, what if you would make a movie of a child and then let AI determine whether the child is malnourished or not? And we thought at Zero Hunger Lab, maybe we can even do it simpler if we have only a few photographs of the child. We might already detect. And this is very important because almost 70% of the children is not tested for malnutrition, so a lot of damage happens and we don't know. But the 30% that are tested take a lot of time for nurses and doctors. And as you can imagine, in Africa, South America, doctors are also needed for a lot of other diseases, and not only the malnutrition of the children. And so that's why we hope. And then it looks like this. Strange enough, let's see, a lot of people don't have food, but the family has a mobile. And what the idea is that with the family mobile, we can take a picture, and then here you see, let's say, lines are plotted by AI on the body, and then there's a whole deep learning network. I'm not going into that. There's an artificial intelligence network, and in the end, it comes out as a kind of output like the child is healthy, so you don't need to do anything. It's a doubtful situation. AI cannot determine it. Then you still need to see a doctor, and the child is wasted or stunted. And then you also need to see a doctor. But we hope that the capacity, let's say, of the medical doctors is really for this, and that we can, let's say, test a lot of children for health. And the final project is about the IPC classification. IPC is a measurement of how serious hunger is in a particular area. And it's very simple. I'm not going through this, but it's very simple. You have a 1 to 5. Simply a number is given to a region. 1 is more or less where we live. There's ample food and we can afford it. 5 is catastrophe. And you really need to be there within 1 week, otherwise people die. And so the other IPC levels 2, 3, and 4 are in between. But 4 and 5 are really, and 3 you already start to be very anxious what's happening. So how is this measured? Because think of a country like Nigeria. Nigeria is bigger than France and Spain together. It's a huge country. How are you going to measure that? Because what they do is, to come to an IPC classification, they have to do all these questionnaires. And they do this 2 times a year. Now you can imagine that's a lot of work. And therefore we cannot, let's say, test, let's say, every country in the way we would like to test it. And what we have thought is the following. We want to use AI to detect whether there's hunger or malnutrition in a particular area. And we do that by investigating local newspapers. So here you see some local newspapers in Somalia. And what we do is we automatically translate them to English and then do all kinds of word counts and pattern recognition. And that is what we do with the AI. And then in the end, we got a table that, let's say, how a lot of numbers, but the bold ones are the best ones. And the news-based, this is what we call news-based, is with, let's say, a forecast of 3 months, is in all cases, it was in all years that we tested it, it was the best. So it is not replacing the current IPC strategy, but it enhances the IPC strategy. And that means that we can better forecast whether there is IPC 3 or 4 in a region, or 4 or 5. And that helps to determine where the food needs to be redirected. Now, further towards the end of my talk, maybe if you like it, we have developed a serious game. It's a board game, and you can play it with between 12 and somewhat more than 30 people. And we play it a lot with primary school and secondary school children, but we also played it with the board of a university. It's really, really nice to play this game, because I'm not going to disclose what is in it, otherwise you know beforehand your strategy. But what we do there is that you see how unequal the world is. And from there on you learn and you see how this whole problem of hunger on a worldwide scale, let's say, influences us. If you are interested, you can contact Miriam Kroese, she's over here, or you can contact me. And what we like it very much, but because so far we already have requests for 400 children to play the game. And that's it, what I would like to convey. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, we are going to kind of have a short Q&A session right after the presentation. And so my question to begin with is, we've talked a lot about solutions and what you're doing with the Zero Hunger Lab, but do you know on a global scale, what would be the most cost-effective solutions towards fighting against childhood hunger and malnutrition? And also, why aren't they more widely implemented?
Yeah, very good questions. Questions that really keep me awake at night. Because the strange thing is that when you look to hunger, it's in fact, on a worldwide scale then, it's not so difficult to solve it from a money perspective. If you look at IFPRI, that's a research institute in Washington, they have calculated to structurally erase hunger in the world, you would need $250 billion. And you think, oh, that's a lot of money, $250 billion. The top 5 taxes of 1 year in the Netherlands is already more than the $250 billion. So if we would give our top 5 taxes, let's say, to the world to solve hunger, for only 1 year, from a money perspective, we could solve it. The problem is that, and that's what we see, Musk on his own can do it. He has 400 billion euros, so he could do it on his own. But there is a kind of disinterest at this moment, but also a political disinterest to really start working. And of course, a lot of NGOs on the ground are working to solve it and to make progress. But yeah, with the new governments, not only in the US, but also in Europe and South America, they get it very, very difficult. But I think the most important thing is that we really get good leadership and then start to work together to solve it. Because I think this can be solved. Of the SDGs, this is maybe not even the most difficult one.
Thank you. Do we have maybe any questions from the... Okay, perfect. I will come and bring you the microphone.
On the presentation, it said that it was 60% or more than 60% of girls that were affected. Do you know why there is a disbalance between boys and girls regarding hunger?
Yeah, so what we see in the numbers, and I have not really dived very deep into it, but that's what you see nearly everywhere, is that girls are not seen as valuable in many cultures as boys. And so the boys always have a slight preference. So they get a little bit more food because it's a boy. And these kind of reasonings you often hear. But I'm not aware of any research but what we see in the number is that in the child mortality for young girls is higher, 60% versus 40%. So it's 1.5 times higher than for the boy.
Are there any other questions from the audience that maybe immediately now after you have seen the presentation something is fresh in your mind?
How are the newspapers used from Africa to enhance the IPS?
What is done is we read, let's say, automatically the newspapers, and then especially the journalistic things, and where they write about. The hypothesis below is that if there is hunger or shortage of food in a particular area, journalists will start to write about it. They will say, hey, there is a shortage of food, there is a shortage of maize, whatever. The harvest has gone, and now in 3 months' time, we will not have sufficient food. All these kind of things, they are kind of counted. And then you can see when the count is low, then probably nothing is happening, and we can show in graphs that when they start to write about it, in fact, it also hunger or malnutrition rises. So there's a strong correlation, and we are after that correlation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm now looking to see if there are any other questions, because I can bring the microphone. If not, you can also think about it, and you can also ask them, as I said, during the panel discussion. Thank you so much for the presentation.
You're welcome.
I am now going to invite our final speaker of this afternoon to present. She is Jamilene Ridderstad, and she is an empowerment coordinator at the Quiet community here in Tilburg. And she is also an expert by experience on poverty, and she is going to talk about her experience and her knowledge on the topic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, as you can see, I'm a little nervous. I just stood up to engage. I'll take the clicker. Yeah. So, this is the first time I'm actually going to share my experience. I'm used to giving trainings in front of groups all the time, but to share your personal story, it's different. She already introduced me, Daniela. My name is Jamilene. I'm an empowerment coordinator at Quiet Tilburg. Quiet is an organization. We support people who live in poverty. We do that by offering products to our members, because people who come to us, we call them our members. With help from sponsors, we offer these people geluksmomentjes, we say in Dutch, but it's actually happy moments. So our members can go one day, they go to lunch or go to the theater, things that for them are almost impossible to do because they don't have the budget to participate in society. And next to that, we also are a community. We have our walk-in hours where people can come to have coffee, to meet each other, to share their stories, and really be part of the community. Since when you live in poverty, life can be very isolating. You can feel very lonely because you cannot participate in a lot of activities that for other people is very normal. Next to being an empowerment coordinator, I'm also a freelance trainer and coach on livelihood insecurity and intergenerational trauma. And today I'm invited to tell about my experience. So I'm also an expert. and I will share my experience with livelihood insecurity and scarcity. I don't use the term poverty always with me because I see poverty as a huge spectrum. And I'm very aware that even though I lacked some resources in my situation, I still have privileges in some cases. So that's why I will use the term livelihood insecurity and scarcity, also in respect to other people who had it, yeah, a little difficult than me. So I want to ask you guys, what do you see here? Yeah? Yeah. I call this my innocence phase. This is me, little Jamilen. Originally born in Aruba, so born and raised in Aruba. I come from a big family. I lived together with my mom, my grandparents, grandma, grandfather, and uncle. And later on, my brother came along in a big house. That's very normal in the Caribbean and South American families to live together with different generations in a house. So my childhood, the younger years, I recall them as very happy, very fortunate actually, because as you see me dancing, that's how we celebrate Carnival in our case, with colors and very festive. And you see me there with a birthday cake. So in my opinion, I didn't lack anything in this period of time because I was spoiled, I would say, especially by my grandparents. If I asked something, I would get it. A toy, birthday, whatever I wanted. And there was no father in the picture, but my grandparents were the support. They gave all the support my mom needed to be able to provide the support to us. And then there came the awareness. This happened during a life event. When I was 13, my grandmother passed away of cancer. And that's when the awareness started for me, because before that period, my grandparents were always involved, financial, emotional support, practical support. They were always there for my mom. And when my grandmother passed away, I felt a whole shift in the situation. All of a sudden, we had to eat a lot of canned food because we had literally a stack of canned food that we could afford. And I saw my mom all the time thinking, okay, what are we going to eat? How are we going to provide this week? And all of a sudden, the stressors became very aware. I became very aware of the stressors in the household. Next to that, this is a funny story. I know it's just a bologna, but I'm used to cutting bolognas in half. And I never thought that was strange until an ex-partner of mine asked me, why do you cut all your bolognas, cheese, everything in half? I was like, everyone does that, that's the norm. And he told me, no, that's so weird. And then I came to the realization that my mom had this rule: we have to save on these bolognas, on this cheese, because we cannot eat one slice at a time. And that was so weird to me that my ex-partner in that moment gave me that realization of the scarcity, that we had to be very aware of how many slices we eat. And I'm still practicing though. Like every time I put a slice on my bread, I'm like, I feel a little naughty, but then I'm like, no, I can practice that. So those are the funny things that I never thought about, but are actually part of funny thing of the story. Leftover meals. My mom had a colleague who had it pretty well, and she would throw all her food away. When they finished dinner, they would throw everything away. And my mom was like, no, give it to us. Give your bread, anything you have, take it, give it to us. So in that way, we were also saving food in some ways. So yeah, that's what I remember. A lot of debt. I saw my mom a lot of times, her debt would amount, there was something would happen, the washing machine would broke down, and then she was like, oh, I have to ask more, I need to ask for more money to pay for this. The car would break down, oh, more debt. So all the time it would accumulate, and the debt is still there after years. So that's what I saw. So many credit card debts also. Secondhand clothes. We also would go shopping sometimes for, new clothes, but I got so used also to getting secondhand clothes from people who would give to us. And now I like going to thrift shops still. And it's part of who I am still. And what was evident was the stress. The chronic stress I saw in my mom made her behavior very erratic, very unpredictable, and she was always on the edge. I did not know what was going to happen each day. So that made the living situation in the house very, yeah, very difficult, because I would come home and I don't know what's going to happen. Is she happy? Is she sad? Is she angry? And how is she going to react to us? We don't know. And that made the situation very difficult to grow up as a child, being always aware of your environment, being alert, highly alert, and walking on eggshells. And those were the awareness moments, but this was the realization. When I was 19, 10 years ago already, I moved to the Netherlands to study pedagogical studies at Fontis Hogeschool Tilburg. I took a huge loan because, yeah, my parents cannot afford the studies for me. So a lot of people of the ABC Islands come to the Netherlands to study. And during my studies, it became clear to me that my upbringing was different. Before my studies, you know, I wasn't really aware. I thought this was the norm, this is normal. And then I would get cases, you know, we need to analyze different cases of children and look at the protective factors and the risk factors. And I would get a case with a bunch of risk factors, and then I would think, this child looks like me. So it was very confrontational and painful during my study to see myself in the cases I was supposed to, yeah, help, the children I was supposed to help, and to recognize myself in them. The aftermath. Well, in the Caribbean and South America, there is this misconception when you come to Europe, you're going to be very rich. And so when people would tell me, oh, you're going to the Netherlands, you're going to be very rich, and you're going to be out of that livelihood insecurity, and your life's going to be perfect, oh my God. And that's so further from the truth. And I realized that after my studies. When I finished pedagogiek, I went to do a master's. I started with a master's, orthopedagogiek, and it was during Corona. And that was such a difficult period. I couldn't finish the master's due to my own mental health. It was just not working for me. I was super depressed. So I stopped with the master's, and then I thought to myself, okay, what am I gonna do now? I have this bachelor's. What is my perspective? I have zero idea. So I started working in the kindergarten, in the care, just to get a salary, to get something, to have something to eat, you know? I need to pay my bills. And then I'm not a student anymore, so that meant I needed to leave my room. But I couldn't find a room. You know, there's a horrible living crisis here in the Netherlands, and I couldn't find a room. Whatever I did, I didn't have the finance, I didn't have the network to support me. So what happened was I ended up in a shelter. And when that happened to me, that was so confrontational, because I thought, I'm trying to climb, as we say. I'm trying to find my way out of a difficult situation and trying to build a life up for myself, but it's not helping. You know, I felt so angry and just alone in my situation, because I'm like, how can I finish my studies, try to climb, and I end up in a shelter? Why am I even trying to do my best for society, you know? And I was very angry. I was very stressed also, because there was zero livelihood insecurity, you know? And that made it difficult because I had to create it. I told myself, we're not gonna stay here. I have papers, I need to get a room, I need to get out of the situation. But when you're in chronic stress, because I experienced chronic stress, you're thinking in short term. So, and that makes it very difficult to focus on the future, because long term seems so impossible. You're just trying to survive and keep your head held high. And it broke me, but at the same time, when I got my room, now I have an apartment, luckily, it motivated me to say, no, I'm going to make this, I'm going to inspire others, I'm going to come out of this. And that's why I'm standing here, actually. So the livelihood insecurity kept following me, is what I want to say. It's not something that if you get out of the situation, oh, it's gone. It's a lifelong thing and I'm still dealing with every day. You know, not only the fact that I ended up at a shelter, but also I have a lot of health problems. You know, I have diabetes. I'm overweight. So I recognize what the professor, you know, said about eating unhealthy, because you don't get all the nutrients in your body. You're used to eating a lot of fried food, things that are cheap because you're just trying to survive. So I do recognize that part. And next to that, I get every day, there are things that trigger me and I get panicked. For example, when doing my taxes, I'm just starting off as a freelancer and I'm just starting off, and then I saw what I have to pay back and I panicked completely. I thought, oh my God, I went totally in budget mode. I'm very good at budgeting. Okay, we're going to scrap everything. We're going to eat out of cans again. I'm gonna eat rice and beans, what I just saw. I still like that though. So I'm going to do all those things. I go back into survival mode, literally. When something happens like that, I go back in survival mode. And I'm still trying to unlearn those patterns and be in the moment, because I'm not in the old situation anymore, but it still keeps following me in my daily life. So my conclusion is, livelihood insecurity, I see it as, in my opinion, the solution is a holistic approach. I don't believe that it's a one-factor problem. It's a multidimensional problem, because in my case, it affected my health, mental health, physical health, just also my confidence. You know, when I ended up in the shelter, it affected my confidence completely. It affected my future perspective, what I'm gonna do with my life. So I feel when it comes to child poverty, we should look at a holistic approach, not just focus on the child if their needs are met, but also the system surrounding the child if also their needs are met, because they cannot give the proper education or upbringing to the child if their needs are not met. We cannot expect that. And that's how you can break the intergenerational cycle. So that is my message to you guys. I just want to say I'm very grateful that I got the chance to share my story, to share how life is for me today. I'm still climbing. I get the question, are you out of it already? No, it's a process. It's not, okay, give me money and everything's over. Like I said, it's internal patterns that I've developed that are still helping me survive daily. And I think those things will always be part of me. Even though if I get a lot of money, I will always want to budget and eat half a bologna. I don't know. Those are the things that will always be part of me. So if you guys want to connect with me, have questions, feel free to add me. And I thank you so much for listening to my story. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your wonderful words and for your presentation. I wanted to ask, maybe we can, take a moment to reflect on how the current community support networks work and whether or not they have an impact on the child's trajectory. And so if a child has access to just social support networks, how do they further impact their evolution?
Well, I think the network of the child is super important, because the child they need role models. I always believe in that model. Your system has so much impact on who you become, how you look at yourself, how you look at the world around you. And if you have those role models, those strong people in the community, or your parents, or in your families, or just someone you can look up to and go for advice, and you look up to them, I think that could help a child to think, hey, I can also come further. I feel empowered. I think in empowering the children that they can also come further.
Yeah.
That's what I believe.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Do we maybe have questions from the audience? Since, we've just heard a story, so maybe now something pops up into your head.
Yes, Jomilene, you did a wonderful presentation. Compliments. If you have some magic sticks and you can change something in the first 30 years in your life, what do you advise us? What do you do with the magic sticks?
That's a great question because then that would mean I would have to change my story in some ways. And I didn't say this, but my story has also a lot of positives because due to the adversities I faced, I also became a very creative, driven, and passionate person. So if I could change something, I think still the stress that my mother experienced because that had such an impact on the household, and I think that could have helped in the upbringing, in the safety, the feeling of safety, and oh yeah, I would change that if possible. But the scarcity, I mean, I'm good at budgeting. I like rice and beans. So to me, I can deal with it, but just seeing your mom always stressed and how much impact that has on you, I think that would have helped a lot.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any other people in the audience? Okay. Thank you.
So I also know a family that is at risk, or like actually is very serious in poverty, and it's a single mom, and she has 3 children. She works a lot, and there's a lot of yelling in the house, and well, the stress you described, I sort of recognize that as well. And so we gave her 100 euros, and she was very thankful, and we didn't like say anything, but we just gave it. We also tried for the children to like invite them every now and then, and to be this sort of let's say safe space or safe person. Is there anything else I could do for such a family, or how would you say, like, what matters in these situations?
I think it's very generous that you guys already gave financial support and that you invited children to the household to experience a safe environment. So you're already doing very great. I think what I said, it's also important to look, what does mother need? Does she have social workers that are helping her? Does she have a therapist? Or, I don't know what the mom's problems are or her issues, but I think if you look at the children's necessities, it's also important to look at the mother's necessities, and then I think the picture is then complete, then you have done what you could in this situation.
Yeah, I guess it's extra complicated because there's probably a lot of shame also attached to it,
Yeah.
and like the ethnic background is also like probably honor oriented, so it's like these things are hard to talk about. But yeah, is there a way to make this more approachable, or in a way to ask it without being direct?
Yeah, actually, you're asking me how can I talk about this in an open manner, create a safe space for this person. What comes to my mind is actually looking at organizations that can invite this person in, like Quiet, for example. Like, hey, I saw this folder and I thought about you. What do you think about this? That could already be a beautiful conversation starter without you being so direct in her face, but you can just give a flyer or say, I found Quiet, for example. You also have Phoenix. That's a woman empowerment organization. You have Contour de Twern. You have so many organizations, and I would see that as a start of a conversation and tell her about them very enthusiastically, and hopefully that could be a nice conversation starter without being super direct and in her business, but just welcoming her to share her story. That's what I would say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I can also stand here. Where is there? Sorry.
He has a question.
Yeah, I might want to add to it because I heard the word shame, and I grew up in poverty too. I'm now 65 in poverty. Again, no, that's not quite correct. I just inherited a lot of money, and I became very tired just because it it wasn't there for a great part of my life. And all my habits, I lost my job in 2015, and then I noticed that I went back to all the things I did when I was young. I was the person in the house who had to do the shopping. So you learn to get on with less and less and less, and building a fort around you so that when things will get worse, you will be prepared. So you will already sit in the cold when it's not necessary already. You will already shower less and colder because, and things like that. But the shame, I find the concept of shame difficult because I think it's much more that you do not learn to trust other people. So it's not the shame that makes you not to talk about your poverty, it's less your lack of trust. And you almost expect people not to understand what you're going through. So that was something I wanted to add. Yeah, I was told I'm studying theology for some years now, and I have a lot of problems. I recognize constant stress makes it very difficult to study, and you cannot always be helped. It's just something that's in you. But I also thought about high-level intelligent people. You have other sorts of needs. I could go to the social wealth things, the houses, but I will not meet the people who are like me. I needed to go to university to be able to be just me, and so yeah. So that's what I wanted to give to you. Do not think about that people who have a high intellectual level, that they might have a bigger people surrounding them. They are maybe even more lonely. So there must be another aspect that makes them take care better of food. Yes, I know a lot about food more. But I have also had a period when I was young that no one took care of us. So I had to eat what was there. So, but my parents invested in education. So that's another problem, because you don't no longer fit in your surroundings. So I don't know. I think I should stop here. But I think I recognize a lot of what you are going through. And I feel that in what you are saying, that in later life, the problems will reappear. And it will, yes, health, everything we are with for. And all of us have health problems. All of us have problems in life. So, yeah. And it was already my mother who had problems, because she lost her father in the Second World War to TBC when she was around our age, when we lost our first parent or family member, important family member. And what I wanted to say, the most important is, I also thought, what if I could do my life over again? What would I change? And I think on my own, I could not change anything. But you need someone in your surroundings who trusts you, who understands that you do not feel safe, and who gives you space. So.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's very important that we have all of these insights to gain even a broader understanding of the subject that we have at hand. Are there any other people who would maybe like to ask a question now? Yeah, if not, we will slowly make a start towards the panel discussion of our event. So we need to grab the chairs in the back. In the meantime, while we organize the stage, I will take a brief moment to talk a bit about what we do at UNICEF Student Team Tilburg. I guess one of the first things that come to mind whenever you hear, this information is, okay, what can I do? And that is something that we also do with UNICEF Netherlands. And so we have this yearly fundraising cause. And each year, of course, we raise money for children in need around the world. And so for this year, the cause is building eco-friendly, sustainable villages in Madagascar, especially because in this area, people are highly affected by climate change issues. And so they need a proper support system, not just, okay, we give you some money now, build a house now, and that's it. No, they need proper villages that they can sustain by themselves, even if something bad happens due to unpredictable climate change. So just for a brief moment, I will grab your attention because we gave you these flyers in the beginning of the event. And here you can read more about what we do and what the situation is like in Madagascar, but also you can see a QR code that you can scan in order to help us reach this yearly fundraising cause. And it would really, really mean a lot to us because it's something that we dedicate ourselves to, and this is something that we work towards all throughout the year. And so your support would really mean a lot to us. That's what I wanted to point out. And now we have the stage, so that's amazing. I would like to kind of start a conversation on, general attitudes of society and what we'd like to see change. And so I will start the question first by addressing the question to. I'll go in the center. I think that's better for the camera as well. I would like to ask you, Nadia, what are some misconceptions or biases that you've noticed in the way people address poverty or talk about poverty?
So in my experience, for example, when we talk to audiences about the research that we do, usually most people are very touched and they want to do something, and they actually often share, I didn't know these things, so they are often unaware. So in terms of misconceptions and biases, I don't know if I really encountered that so much, like biases, because most people want to help. Oftentimes they don't know what to do. And I think that's more what we see rather than that there is a problem with the attitude. That's at least something that I haven't really experienced, actually.
And that's good to hear, at least. And also, we will switch a bit to hunger. So I would like to ask you, Hein, if how much do you see people know about childhood hunger and malnutrition in the Netherlands? And is it more likely that your audience often attributes these issues to, other countries, like, oh, that happens in less developed countries. It's not a problem in the Netherlands. Is that something you encounter, and how do you deal with such comments?
Yeah, so what we see is that in general, worldwide, there's not so much awareness about food, also in the West. I only have to look to my children. And I think they have grown up in relatively good circumstances, but they are not working on it. But when you go to the 3 billion people, where I say they have the relatively simple meal, which might be sufficient to get the hungry feeling out, but it's not a good meal, and that's what you see worldwide a lot, and that has to do that people simply can't afford it. Yeah. Your very nice story. I liked the way you told it. Yeah.
And Jamilen, I also want to ask you if you could change one aspect in the way people talk or address poverty, what would it be and why?
I think this is in connection with your question about biases, because I work at Quiet and I experience bias the whole time about my job. Why do we need Quiet? I mean, people are lazy and they're fat and they don't contribute to society, and there is so much judgment actually about people's situation. And I hope people can be more compassionate and understanding, because when I look at the members of Quiet, I see very powerful people who, unfortunately, due to circumstances in life, didn't get the opportunities, or due to health issues, couldn't improve their lives like they would want to. So, I hope people could be more aware of their words, and because words have meaning, and to be more compassionate in how they approach people who come from very vulnerable positions.
I understand that. Thank you. I will also turn to the audience because even though, I have my share of questions based on, my enthusiasm on this topic and also my drive to fight against poverty and hunger, that doesn't mean that this is a moment when you can also ask questions. So if you could also, raise your hands if you have some. Oh, perfect. Okay, then I will do a limbo. Thank you.
Yes. So regarding hunger, is it what would be a bigger problem that should be addressed? Is it the workforce on the ground, or is it the financial budget was mentioned at 250 billion, but is it a problem collecting that even, or is there another factor that is hard to get done?
Yeah, if you look to hunger, I think one of the most important things is we really have to decide as United Nations in these Sustainable Development Goals that we really want to achieve it. That we spend money on it and that we are really going to help people. But what you see more and more is that hunger is used as a weapon. So complete areas of a country are kind of locked. And they also know that if people don't get food, they start to get angry and all these kind of things. And that helps the enemy and these kind of things. So we should work on, and it was also mentioned, these problems are so multifaceted, so many things that play a role, and I think we should somehow work on all of them. But I think the biggest one for me is the leadership. If we would have really good leaders who say, no, this is impossible, and in fact, you could say, for me, it's when a child is malnourished and growing up, I think it's a kind of mistreatment, and not that the parent can say it, but from the government more. And there are already, and I know the Zero Poverty Lab is also working on that, more from the law side, that we simply cannot say that this can be true. We really need to do something.
And by leadership, do you refer to political leaders or
political leadership? Political leadership. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And how is your onderzoek, research, helping in the discussion about hunger?
Yeah, it differs. It differs per project. What we did for WFP is most of the time in the logistics and in the food basket, what they call the food basket. And so we have to, the one I showed you was in logistics, how to get the food in a very, but what we also did is we optimized also the food baskets, because what you often saw is that they were moving food from, let's say, from Canada, these kind of Canadian lentils, they were shipping it all the way to Africa. And on the other hand, you have Turkish horse beans. They have nearly the same nutritional content, but they come from Turkey. Now, from Turkey to Africa is a completely different story than from Canada to Africa. And these kind of things, they are simply used, and that's where you see the savings from. And sometimes it's also in advice. We also look at, for example, how money is spent, because sometimes not food is brought, but they bring money. That people get a little bit more room to make their own choices. And we have also looked into that, how people spend the money, and then you get a kind of advice, what kind of money and how you should spend it, how you should divide it. Should you give it weekly or monthly? Should you give it to the man in the household or the woman in the household? And these kind of things. And then you get a kind of policy recommendations.
I have a question for Nadia. Nadia, in the -9 month, you advised everyone who wants a baby to eat foliumzuur. Yeah, I don't know him. And not to. Is that the? If you do that, then it will be okay, or because my parents, they smoked, they drank, and even I'm here. Yeah? What would have been if they not? No. But what are, because otherwise a woman, a pregnant woman in poverty, in stress said, oh, I'm eating the foliumzuur, it's everything okay.
Yeah, so first, it's not my advice, it is a general advice from the doctors, but it's really about preventing a very serious neuro complication of the brain where the child may not even be born alive. So it's really a serious problem. So this is something that can go very, very wrong. What we typically see in the case of poverty is that there are a lot of risk factors that on their own have a specific, maybe smaller effect, but then they accumulate. So yeah, the smoking, for example, and other factors. And again, even though that is the case, sometimes some children are remarkably resilient, actually. So we also don't fully understand that part. So the genes and then the environment, which is, say, smoking or certain nutrition. So the example of folic acid is really like a bare minimum for development, but there is a lot between optimal and the bare minimum.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I also wanted to ask, these questions kind of got me thinking, if maybe you could share something that is surprising in your work or your research, something that you wouldn't expect people to know about childhood poverty or childhood malnutrition. It's a question addressed to everyone, that's why.
Yeah, I suppose I could start. I've thought about this, and I think when it comes to poverty, everybody has ideas about what poverty is, what poverty does to a person. If you've experienced adversity yourself, you have your own view on it. So I would say that a surprising kind of finding is maybe not so surprising, but what I was intrigued by, and I still am, is how much education seems to matter, to play a role. So I've gone through a lot of studies on early life poverty and brain development, and it's a recurring theme, the parental education, that it is a protective factor if the mother has higher education or the parents. A lot of these effects seem to be buffered. So I thought that's something I think intriguing, and of course I had also an opportunity for higher education. I see the people you get in contact with, the things you learn. Of course, a lot of things change, the network you acquire, the knowledge you have. So it seems to do something even in the context of scarcity.
I recognize a lot in what you say. Despite the scarcity, I'm still very grateful I got to study. I went to HAVO, I did VWO, and I did pedagogiek. I took a huge student loan, so I know what I was doing, but I do think that helps me shape my way in looking at the world. So education does play a part. It doesn't mean that after you get a diploma, you're rich, like a lot of people suddenly think. You need to still climb and make your way. But I do experience currently that I'm sitting between two different worlds because I'm climbing. One day I'm sitting with directors at a table who are mentoring me to help me in my business. And the next day I'm sitting with very unprivileged people on the table and helping them. So when you're climbing, you see all facets of life. I see people from all over, just different positions. And that makes my position currently very difficult because I don't know where I belong. So I recognize what you said. When you have education, I don't know where I belong because I'm climbing and it's so diverse. So I think that was a new realization that made me also grateful for the fact that I have education. And that was for sure a protective factor.
Yeah, maybe one thing that still surprises me is that from a hunger perspective, that a lot of people don't know the big numbers, as I showed you. The 800 million that are really going hungry to bed, and the 3 billion that don't have on a daily basis sufficient macro and micronutrients. And on the other hand, what I told earlier, that in fact we can solve it and we don't do it. That's frustrating.
Yeah, that's very true. Thank you so much. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question, I think, for you, Jamilen. You spoke about how judgmental society can be towards people who are poor, especially here in the Netherlands. I know when I see, I don't know, documentaries about poverty or something, then I always see people with, and now I know this is not the right way to say it, who are smoking a lot, who have a dog that needs food, who, I don't know, don't open their envelopes anymore. And it is easy to think, why do people make those choices? They know it's not good. Maybe you can explain a bit about the stress and yeah.
Well, that has to do with a short-term thinking, because it's chronic stress when you're constantly in survival mode. And I see this at Quiet, where I work all the time. A lot of people smoke, a lot of people have pets, they have a TV. How come they have a big TV? So I know all these judgments, but it's because of the short-term, you're not busy with long-term visions. You're busy just with short-term. I need to pay this bill, I need to eat this. And the smoking is a way to relax, actually. It's their way of relaxation. And when you're constantly in a chronic stress mode, you cannot think rationally at times. Actually, no, not at times. You cannot think rationally. You make very irrational decisions, so people will judge that and say, but you're not coming up with a solution. You're choosing this. You know, that's mostly what I hear. And I don't believe that, because when you're in chronic stress, you cannot think rationally. So your brain works differently. And I think when coming up with solutions, I believe more in long term. These people need someone next to them, helping them look at the long term. How can we make sure that you can make the steps to a more long term, more sustainable, more solid base, foundation? We cannot go back to childhood and fix everything that happened, but we can now build a house maybe and fix a little crack here and there and get a house together. So I believe we should sit next to people and help them look at long term, because on their own, it's very difficult.
Thank you so much. Do you have me? Yes. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, because you are also in different circles, do they sometimes tell poor people, or I don't know how to formulate it, but you are the example of one who has made it, and so everyone can make it?
That's in a position I'm in right now, and I find it a very difficult position because I don't see myself as a poster child. You know, I'm not a poster child for someone who made it. This is my story. And like I said, I had here and there a couple of privileges. So I have a difficult time when people say, but you made it, you're the example. You know, I had one time a director come to me and he says, I want to mentor you because you're not a victim. And I understood where he was coming from. So I saw it as a compliment, but at the same time, I felt a little guilt. Because I felt like, wait a minute, I still identify with this group. I still identify with this community. I'm still part of them. So I felt like he insulted a part of me. So for me, it's difficult. What I said, living between these two worlds. So I'm still finding my way, to be honest. I don't have a concrete answer to your question, but I'm still finding my way in dealing with these compliments of the example. I don't see myself yet as an example. I'm learning, I'm climbing. But like I said, it affects me when people talk about people who are poor. It still affects me. Even though I'm climbing, it still affects me because I identify with them still.
Thank you so much.
I'm not very good in English, but I try to explain what I mean. You put focus, Jamilan, on the parents, so we have to help them to help the children. But the children, also in Holland, a lot of children are now in need. They are hungry and they have no 3 meals a day, and they have no clothes that are appropriate to the seasons. There's so much to do to help those people. And how can we help them above charity? Do you know what I mean? Charity means gratitude, and we have to recognize the people for who they are, and give the children self-esteem.
You're talking about empowerment.
Yes.
How can we empower people
Yes.
without always giving material stuff only? Or is
but
that
also
your-
material stuff, because
so
they are
with
hungry.
material stuff, but also empower them. So
Yeah.
also not just the external, changing the external factors, but internal,
Yes.
the confidence, empowering.
Yes, and daring to ask for food, for instance,
So that
without
people
feeling guilty.
just ask for help.
Children
Ask for help. You know what? I find that a difficult question because a lot of times what I see at Quiet is the children are not even aware because that is your normal. That is your normal. So it's very difficult to expect from a little child for them to tell you, this is what I need. Absolutely, there are kids that from a young age, they were spoiled or they got whatever they want, so they ask all the time what they want. But what I see is from children from under not privileged backgrounds that they don't ask for a lot because this is their circumstance. So the parents in that way is the one you should contact and communicate more because the child is not busy with the poverty they're living in. It's their normal. So I feel like the communication should go in that when the children are little, it starts with the parents. And later on, maybe the child will see and become aware of the situation and maybe ask for help. That's how I see it.
Hi, thank you for your presentations. I was wondering, are there also numbers that show what kind of programs are very effective? Are there any examples of countries or regions that were successful in alleviating at least some of the elements and the factors that cause poverty?
Yeah, good question. So it depends. So what we usually talk about in the Zero Poverty Lab is we're very busy also with the definition of poverty. So because it has all these facets, or sometimes we look at income, sometimes we look at like a socioeconomic status, which is a more complex measure. So it depends what we are targeting exactly. But for example, with early life poverty, there was even a randomized controlled trial in the US where they gave families money every month. So they gave them $300 from pregnancy, and then for a few years. They tested the children. So interestingly, what they find is that the stress for the parents is not reduced, and that makes sense because despite the extra money that you get, your situation is still the same, and the future is still as uncertain. But for the children, they can see differences in, so they do some neuroimaging measures and they do cognitive measures, and there they see also that the parents were spending the money on more food, nutritious food for the child, more toys, books, because they actually could track all of that. So there were effects for the child, but the stress for the parents is still there. So if we want to target the stress, then we need to support people and target the problems that they have, maybe with the labor market, maybe they're not able to work, maybe they're sick. So there are other factors. But then with the children, the money helped. So there are also the basic income programs that try to actually work on the level of the stress and the mental health. In Finland, they've done that. They ran a trial or a pilot study. So there seem to be positive effects on health with, for example, basic income situation where you are assured that you'll get certain amount of money every month. But yeah, I think it really depends on how far into the future the help goes, and if we are helping people to be able to be a part of society long term, or are we just giving money and then they still have all the stress and the worries?
Thank you so much. Have just checked the time, and I think maybe there are people who, have tutorials or classes after this. But the discussion is really, really interesting. And so I don't want you to think that this is the end of the event quite yet, because after we are wrapping up here, I would like to invite you all to join us for coffee and drinks in the Esplanade Cafe right here, because I think it's very important that we continue to talk about this topic, and also maybe you have questions that you would personally like to ask to one of the speakers. So please join us for drinks afterwards. And I would like to really, really thank you for being with us today and sharing such valuable information. I think it's really important for us as an audience now to properly think about what we've heard right now, process it, and think of what we can do ourselves in the future. And so it's really, really important that, especially for the students here at Tilburg University, that we know, first of all, of what happens in the municipality and what are the communities or associations that we can help out in, but also what are the research labs and what people that are, even our professors, are doing back in the backstage and not in the classroom. So thank you so much for all the information that you have provided.